Hi, this is Erica. Welcome to Hack Your Health. On this channel, I'm really inspired by my own experiences with healing when it was said to be impossible. For me, that meant that I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease and I had a fistula, and both of those things the doctor said would be forever. And I managed to find ways of healing both of them. I feel like if I had listened to them, I would have been sick for my entire life. Also, I did end up being sick for a number of years, and I feel like if I had access to more information about my disease and what I could do about it, the number of years that I feel like I lost to the disease or diseases would have been less. In this video, I'm gonna give you some ideas for what I did on the Specific Carbohydrate Diet, because when I got diagnosed with Crohn's disease, I was allergic to a lot of the medications and decided to do the Specific Carbohydrate Diet instead, and I had absolutely amazing results. So I did that when I was 21 to 22, so I did it for a full year, and I'm now 27, and I have never had any flares at all, ever again. I've had, of course, the normal thing where the odd thing gives you a stomach ache or something like that, but I've never had any Crohn's symptoms since I did the Specific Carbohydrate Diet. So if you're researching it and you're seeing a lot of people at the beginning, I'm here to tell you that it can and does have lasting results. And I'll do another video that goes into studies, because there have been some small studies of the Specific Carbohydrate Diet and they've shown very positive results. One that was only on about 36 people, 100% of them saw reduced symptoms and needed less medication. So people like myself, like I wasn't included in any studies, but if I had been, they would have been positive. So that's the case with many people. They've had positive results, but nobody's studying us. And we don't go to the doctor anymore. Like, I haven't seen my doctor since I was 21, so he doesn't know that I have no symptoms and no more fistula. Maybe I should tell him. I would be encouraged by what you do find instead of discouraged by the lack of evidence, because a lot of these drug companies are the ones doing the clinical trials, and they're charging a lot of money for those drugs. They aren't going to get a lot of money if people do the Specific Carbohydrate Diet. So there's just simply not money going in to study it. That does not mean that it doesn't work. Okay, so just because there's less studies or fewer participants doesn't mean that it doesn't work. It just means that it's not profitable for people to spend money studying them. Okay, so on the Specific Carbohydrate Diet, I went from being a vegetarian to a non-vegetarian, and I would recommend that if you're a vegetarian, as long as that's okay with your moral compass. I started making a lot of bone broth. I started making a lot of fermented foods. For breakfast, I would make my own kefir instead of the yogurt because it's easier and faster, and I would have kefir with some honey and hemp seeds, which are also really anti-inflammatory. And that's often what I had for breakfast. Or I would have eggs, like egg, sausage, and sauerkraut, for example, would be a good breakfast. Or I would cook apples and pears with sort of cinnamon and butter and honey in them. And I would eat that, or an omelet or something like that. And with omelets, I made two different kinds. An omelet with onion, garlic, mushrooms, and those kinds of things in it. And then I made an omelet that was with curry and cauliflower. So that kind of experimentation with the foods that you do eat can lead to more variation in your diet. I also eliminated most nightshades. And the reason I found that I was sensitive to those is because I kept a food journal for the first 30 days that I did the Specific Carbohydrate Diet. in order to see what other sensitivities I had that were allowable so that I could remove those as well. And I found that really helpful. For one thing, it helped me stay accountable to the diet while I was still starting it. So there was no temptation to cheat, because if I did, I would need to write it down, and that made it more real somehow. So I did this very strictly the entire time I did it. And the other thing was I found that I was also sensitive to tomatoes and to like block cheddar cheese, but not real cheese, like European style. I was allergic to like American style, or not allergic, but sensitive. It gave me symptoms. Yeah, I also did a lot of cooked chicken. This is a really easy thing to do. I would just take a whole chicken and put all the vegetables like beets and broccoli and carrots and stuff in the same container, season it, put garlic on it, whatever, onion inside, stick it in the oven, and I could eat that for like 2 or 3 days, because I was a single person and I was also on a very small budget. Okay, I was a sick university student paying my way through university. So I had been unable to work for a while. I was living off of almost nothing. So if I can do it, I would say you can do it too. It's just a matter of being really specific with what you need, not buying all these fancy things, just eating normal food. And actually unprocessed food is often cheaper than processed food, so you really can do this diet on a budget. You just can't buy a lot of really specialty ingredients on a budget. For example, for probiotics, I couldn't afford to buy probiotic capsules. Like, that was completely out of reach. So I made kefir, which is just the cost of milk. And I made sauerkraut, which is just the cost of cabbage. And I made kombucha, which does have sugar, but it's fermented. So I did make that. And those were my sources of probiotics, not store-bought ones. If you can afford like Natron and stuff like that, those are awesome. But if you can't, then I would suggest just making your own, and then you can afford it. Same with bone broth. I would make my own bone broth and use that to make soups. I hardly ever ate out, and eating out can be a bit difficult on this diet. When I did eat out, I ate sashimi at sushi places. That's all acceptable. And I ate pho, but I asked for it with no noodles. So that just means it's basically beef soup. And like I said, I didn't have very much money, so I didn't eat out very much at all. And when I was at the store, like getting a snack during the day, I would get Lara bars, and I would get those chicken thighs that are often in the deli section of supermarkets. And I would get sort of smoked salmon. I live on the West Coast, so that's available widely where I live. And packages of like cashews and other kinds of nuts. As well as I would eat a lot of whole avocados, and I avoided a lot of tropical fruits, but occasionally would eat bananas, and stuck to more local fruits like apples and pears, because of a naturopath recommended that I only eat local varieties of fruits and not too many, because of the potassium content and how my body was interpreting what it needed. Basically, if you eat a high potassium food that's grown in a hot climate, like a banana or a mango, and you live in a cold, dark place like me, your body thinks that you're in a place with sunlight and doesn't produce as much vitamin D. So you become more calcium deficient, and I was very calcium deficient at the time. And the division between your large and small intestine, there's like a sphincter there, and it's largely made of calcium. So the naturopath recommended that I eat as much calcium-rich food as I could and reduce those tropical foods in order to increase my calcium absorption and rebuild that sphincter, which was letting the bacteria into the small intestine when they were only supposed to be in the large intestine. So for me, I wasn't eating tropical fruits, and I didn't find that that made much of a difference. But I still ate a lot of avocados. I just didn't eat the sweet kind of fruits from other places. And I mostly ate apples and pears cooked, not raw, for the most part. Anyways, that's a side note. Local foods are often the best for healing. I would eat, let me check my notes. I also found that boiled eggs were really easy to just carry around and have. And it sounds like it's not a lot of food, but I always felt very satisfied. And I also felt like, well, for one thing, a lot less pain. I was able to feel happiness, whereas before I was completely miserable. So even though it seems like, okay, it's a lot of work, you have to cook your own stuff, it's totally worth it. I never felt like I was, starving. I felt like I was starving when I didn't do the diet because I wasn't absorbing food. So even, but here's some more ideas. So I would eat beef and vegetables, just varying the vegetables. I ate a lot of beets, I ate Brussels sprouts, I ate a lot of garlic, and squash, stuff like that. So varying your vegetables is going to help a lot. I didn't eat that much raw food, but salads, obviously, juices, stuff like that. I didn't really eat very many lentils or chickpeas because for me, they were irritating, but you can eat those if you tolerate them. I ate sprouts. You can do a lot with nuts and seeds, sprouting them, grinding them up, experimenting that way. I bought a dehydrator so that I could make dehydrated apples and other kinds of dehydrated foods, sort of experimenting that way. And at one point, someone actually gave me a whole salmon, just randomly, and I sliced up this entire salmon, marinated it, and put it in the dehydrator and had salmon jerky, and that actually lasted a really long time and was amazing. So you could try getting a dehydrator and making your own kinds of jerky and dried foods. That was a lot of fun, actually. And kale chips with nutritional yeast on them is also really delicious. So I got a lot more experimental with food during that time, and I really got a lot better at cooking. It really improved my cooking skills. So I did the Specific Carbohydrate Diet for 1 full year. And then I started gradually reintroducing foods. So first I just ate rice. I only added rice. And that lasted about, I'd say, a few months. Then I added things like oats and potatoes and wheat I did last because I found I was the most sensitive to those. And I still don't eat those like every day or anything like that. But now I can basically tolerate any food, but I have not gone back to eating how I did before I did the Specific Carbohydrate Diet. I find that this really educates you about how food affects your body, and you become a lot more self-aware. Like you can feel it if you eat something and it doesn't affect you very well. You can feel it and you're like, oh, you become way more aware of what you're eating. And you also develop better habits and you enjoy those kinds of foods so much more. So I would say if you're starting this, just start with something basic like chicken thighs with beets, carrots, and other vegetables with butter on them. That's a really satisfying and healthy meal that isn't weird. You may be used to eating it with rice or potatoes, but it's not weird without those. It's still filling. And I would try to eat sauerkraut with a lot of my meals and get that dose of probiotics, and that helped a lot. And yeah, I would just say, eat those normal foods that you eat just without the carbs, and you won't miss them. That's the thing. You still feel full. In fact, you feel better because that's what your body wants. And I started eating a lot more fat and a lot more butter, and I found that like using that sort of fat for fuel was really energizing for me. I had way more energy. You're just gonna have to figure out what you like, but those are a few suggestions. It was really simple, and I didn't feel like I was starving or anything. The hardest part would have been eating out, but you could always ask for like chicken or salmon with just vegetables. There's going to be something at every restaurant that you can play with. And just choose the restaurant yourself if you can. And if you'd like any tutorials on how to make these specific foods, well, you can check out, I already have one on bone broth and one on sauerkraut and one on kombucha, and I'll be continuing with those types of videos, so you could check those out. I would definitely encourage you, if you're thinking about the specific carbohydrate diet, to do it, because it is life-changing. It empowers you to not have to be on a waiting list and having your life in someone else's hands. It makes it possible for you to empower yourself to improve your own life, to regain health for yourself, and not accept a life of misery. Like, I can't even imagine where I would be if I allowed myself to be sick for my whole life, like the doctors said. I mean, I live a full life. And if you have a fistula, I got Shara Sutra treatment in India for that, and I have a fistula vlog, and there's others on here on YouTube who have had the Shara Sutra for their fistulas. So if you have one of those, you might want to check that out. And I wish you all the best on your healing journey. And if you'd like to see more of my videos, please subscribe. If you like this video, please let me know by pushing like. And let me know if you have any questions, comments, video suggestions, or anything else that you'd like to say. And I look forward to connecting with you. Thanks for watching. Bye.